Okay, great. So, hi everyone. My name is Rita Fonseca, and I'm speaking on behalf of Euphoria. We just published Eliza Clark's Boy Parts, and we're very happy to have both Eliza and Rita Danova for a conversation with everyone. So, thank you very much, Eliza and Rita, and I'm going to pass the word to you. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, Eliza. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How's the weather? Are you in London?
Yes, I am. It's been all right today, but it's starting to get really
Okay.
cold. We've had a couple of days of like really awful weather though, so it hasn't been so bad today.
Oh yeah, we've had them as well here. So
Mm.
it's not usual. Lisbon is usually a very good place to live with lots of
Mm.
sunny days, but not good today. in the last few days. So thank you so much for this chat. I read Boy Parts, I think in 2001 or 2002, I guess. And I was very happy when I heard that it was published in Portugal. So I have
Mhm.
your Portuguese version here.
Yes,
And
it
I
looks so
was,
cool.
yeah, it does. And I was really excited because it has a very special blurb in it, which is mine. So it was my first book blurb, and I was really, really excited. And what I say here is that I loved all the experience of reading this book, but
Thank
I
you.
could not deny that it was a little bit crazy. So
Yes.
I would like to start. I would like to start with that. So Boy Parts is a really dark and twisted story. And we have this really different protagonist, female protagonist, Irina. Would you like to just go through the story really quick so everyone can?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, it's been a while since I've done like a Boy Parts book event because obviously it came out in
I know.
2020 for me, so I'm trying to remember my like one sentence pitch for it. I suppose it's about a female photographer who is kind of down on her luck after being very successful in her very early 20s, and works in a bar in her hometown and is very bitter and twisted about that and takes out a lot of her frustration on the male models that she scouts in the street.
Yeah, and then she's invited to an exhibition in London,
Mhm.
and then she starts going through all of her photos, and we with those photos we go back and we learn a bit more
Yes.
about her.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in this mechanism used with the photos. And I guess the first question I have for you is, so Boy Parts is about a female photographer, and did you have any previous experience with photography? Why would you? Why did
Um,
you choose photography as a medium to explore?
um, I went to an art school. I'm very like I'm always quite reticent to draw any parallels between myself and Irina because she's such a horrible person and we're very different people. But I did go. I'm from the same town, the same city as her, which is Newcastle in the northeast of England, and I went to an art school in London, which was a big culture shock. Going from a sort of small northern city where there's quite a big divide in wealth, but also in access to kind of cultural stuff between the north of England and
Mhm.
London. And a lot of there's not you don't really have as much access to it in Newcastle. And but yes, I went to art school in London, and I'm a terrible artist. I'm not a very good artist. So I wasn't I sort of started I went in as a sculptor, and then I tried to do photography, but I was only interested in photographing people, but I'm actually really shy. So I couldn't like bring myself to approach people to photograph them. I was just far too shy. But I was very interested in photography theory, and a lot of the stuff, a lot of the sort of philosophy and thought and critical theory around photography, which I kind of I mean, I think Susan Sontag is the epigraph for boy parts, and I was kind of really interested in like I said, I guess photography theory and the idea of a photograph as a sculpture and a like physical impression of something really, really stuck with me. As well as the idea of the presumption of veracity, that we assume that photographs are truthful when we see them. Maybe not so much anymore, as we're in a bit of a sort of post-truth situation with photography now, but you tend to assume photographs are true and reflect reality. And I think I was quite interested in the sort of drawing the parallels between that and the unreliable narrator, and how photography can be unreliable in the way that a narrator can be unreliable, but still often we kind of give both of these this presumption of veracity, which I was really interested in. And I'm interested in extreme and like shock images and extreme films. And I wrote my dissertation on extreme imagery and the sort of collection and curation of extreme images. And I think it just ended up being a bit of a culmination of all of my interests. But no, I wasn't a photographer myself, but I well, not never properly, but I was interested in everything kind of around photography, but I was too shy to do it properly, I think.
And you found a way to just like explore all of that through writing, which is very interesting, because you do not have a visual you do not have visual information in writing, but then you describe all these photos and all these really extreme images, as you said. So I think it's really interesting that it's like it's not just the photography, but the description that you do of them. It's really interesting. You said that you compare the truth behind photography with this unreliable narrator that is Irina. And I read a very funny review on Goodreads that said that Irina was the final boss of unreliable narrators. Did you mean to do that? Did you mean to create her as a really as unreliable and twisted? And was that the start for boy parts? Where did it all start?
Yeah, so it begun as a short horror story, really. It was I think when I finished it, it was around 15,000 words long, which is a very unusable length for a piece of short fiction. It's not really a piece of short fiction anymore. It's like a short novella. And I was really interested in that character and that unreliable voice. And I've always been very interested in the monologue format and the unreliable narrator. I think one of my favorite books is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I think that's to me, that's the final boss of unreliable narrators. I love Lolita. And then when I was even younger than that, there's I don't know how internationally known Alan Bennett is, but he's a British playwright who he wrote The History Boys. That's his most famous thing. But he did this very famous series of monologues that were shown on the BBC in the 1980s called Talking Heads, which was it was like half an hour straight to camera, a well-known British actor performing a 30-minute monologue written by Alan Bennett. And they were all, it was like absolutely revolutionary for me. I was so fascinated by them, and that they're all this sort of just this study in dramatic irony and this exercise in unreliable narration, and kind of hearing a story from the point of view of a character and then learning their personality, and then going back and analyzing the story and thinking about what's true and what's not true that they've actually said. It really awoke something in me, I suppose. And we had like a writing exercise in class where we had to write a monologue in the style of like Alan Bennett. And I remember mine just went on for like pages and pages and pages, and I didn't finish it because it was like thousands of words long. But I was just I was really drawn in by this sort of monologue format. And all of the kind of earlier short stories I wrote before boy parts kind of around the same time a lot of them were first person point of view. I think it just feels like quite a natural sort of thing for me to kind of click into, I suppose.
And that comes with the risk of you being confused with Irina and all of that.
It does, yes. And I was very like conscious of that when I first kind of when it was first published. And I think I'm less conscious of it now. I think pretty much just because I don't know. I feel like I went out of my way to make sure that people knew that I wasn't the narrator in the press build up, which is a little bit depressing to have to kind of do that. But it worked. I guess I haven't really been accused of being similar to her in a very long time.
I think I read an interview that you did with, I think it was The Guardian, where the journalist said that she was really scared to meet you before because she was like with Irina's image in mind, and then she met you and it was all really different. So I think you did a good job in keeping things straight. And but how did you build such a character as Irina? Where did the inspiration come from? Like,
I think I was just, like I said, I wanted to write this sort of short horror story, and it was a short horror story about a female photographer that killed men in a kind of almost like a kind of Peeping Tom-esque way. And yeah, I was thinking about that, and that was kind of it. It was a bit of a writing exercise at first, and then I kind of realized that I had like a character that I was really interested in a world that I wanted to spend more time with. And then it just sort of grew from there. A lot of it was sort of, I felt like it kind of like fine-tuning the character and coming up with some rules for her. Like, I think in the first draft she was very self-deprecating. So it was written in a voice that was actually probably a lot more similar to mine, and then it was kind of hammering the me out of it a bit. Was a lot of the process was taking out things like taking out self-deprecating jokes, and like she never says like please or thank you, and she never asks people any questions. It was kind of thinking about stuff like that to just make her feel a bit more refined and pinpointed, which I really enjoyed that process a lot. And then I was on a mentorship scheme at the time, and my mentor, who is another British writer from the Northeast called Matt Wesolowski, said that the like interesting thing for him about this character is learning why she is the way she is, and like drilling into that more. And I think that was where more of that flashback stuff came from, was sort of almost like a way to explain her a bit to the audience, so she wasn't just this sort of almost like shock factor character, I guess. And giving her a bit more kind of nuance. But yeah, it was quite a gradual process. It was almost like writing something that was in my own voice, and then changing the character a lot and making her feel very concrete and different.
And I guess that you one of the things that I found most interesting is that Irina almost never describes herself. She's described by the relation she has with other characters, such as her mother or her best friend. And lots of people love the dynamics between Irina and Eddie from Tesco, but I really enjoyed these dynamics between Irina and her best friend, because this is such a unique way, and unique friendship. Is really like female friendship at its finest, like this really toxic friendship. Did you get inspiration from any dynamics in your life?
I kind of, when I guess talking about the three main characters of boy parts who I would consider to be Irina, Eddie from Tesco, and Flo, Irina's best friend. I've always sort of described them as almost like three like terrible, like the worst aspects of my own personality in some ways. So I, as much as there are kind of parts of me that do identify with Irina, I really identify with Flo. I think she's potentially the character I'm most similar to in a lot of ways. And that I was kind of interested in the way that that in my life I've often been drawn to quite angry people, and that it's sort of having kind of like a close friendship with somebody who's quite angry and volatile, and being able to be a person who is sort of consistently in their life and able to handle them, the way that that sometimes made me feel quite like special, and quite like I was able to, I don't know, the kind of that thing of being chosen by somebody who's quite difficult, but also that you're kind of able to like put up with it. It's like I think it's like a huge personality flaw. I don't think it's like a good thing that I do that, or that I have done that. I don't think I really do it now as an adult, but as a teenager, definitely I was very, very drawn to very volatile personalities. Yeah, I've always found that interesting about myself, and I suppose I was kind of exploring it a bit with Flo, and like yeah, Flo is kind of a bit of an extended self drag, I
Okay.
guess. And I was kind of interested in how that sort of, I don't know, that almost like having to constantly like sort of behave around someone else's volatile personality, like how toxic that is, and how yeah, I mean, I never had a friendship that was quite that like bad, but
Yeah.
I definitely like relate to kind of like trying to mold yourself around somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
very
Someone.
like unpleasant in some ways, for almost like no reason at all.
But you feel drawn. But you feel drawn to them no matter what.
Yeah.
It's like this really weird situation. And then we have Eddie from Tesco, which is a really, I would describe him as a sad boy, I think. Yeah. And then you kind of, you actually feel sorry for him, like from beginning to end. Was he the hardest character to write? Because I feel that he would be the hardest character to write. I don't know why, but reading it, I just like
Sorry,
by
I
reading
think,
it. Sorry.
sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Could I
Oh,
just ask you
sorry.
to repeat that? Thank you. I think
Yeah,
it's
no
me,
worries.
but
No worries. Because I felt like while reading the book, I felt like Eddie would be the hardest character to write and to build. Was it that way? Because it was like, or just an impression I got.
yeah, that's interesting. I really like Eddie from Tesco. I think is my favorite character. I really like writing him. I found, I think it's because it was just sort of, I think what was difficult was like sort of crafting this character that I felt quite bad for, and that I really like, I felt I sort of bonded with a little bit, and then humiliating him and putting him through these awful situations. So it was sort of that I found that like surprisingly difficult at points, and that I just sort of, it was like coming up with like the most embarrassing and like horrible situations to put this poor man through. um, but I think probably the most difficult character was I think just Irina, in
Okay.
terms of the keeping her consistent, and keeping her like consistently inconsistent. And I think like sometimes when you're writing an unreliable narrator, it makes you feel like you can kind of get away with things that you maybe wouldn't if you were writing in third person, or writing a reliable first person narrator. But yeah, it was making sure that I kind of stuck to the rules with her, and kept her like as like weird as possible, without tipping into the realm of like silly and unbelievable. So yeah, I think she was probably the most difficult character to write, even though the voice was quite natural. It was kind of keeping the voice reined in and consistent.
Okay. I really like the way that she and Eddie are like polar opposites, and it's usually a relationship that you see reversed. Like usually in media or books or entertainment, you see men as Irina and women as Eddie from Tesco. Like women were not today, but usually they were historically, they were um, weaker and sadder, and then you have here you reverse the, the way they are. And was it intentional? Did you mean to reverse them?
Yeah. It was quite it was almost like an early kind of mission statement for the project. Was wanting to write about the way, I guess, what would happen if a woman tried to treat men the way that men treat women. So it was very intentional.
And I guess that's why a lot of people usually say that this is like the female version of American Psycho. Was it an inspiration for you?
I actually hadn't read it when
or it happened. Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't read it when I wrote Boy Parts, but I read it afterwards. I think about a year afterwards. And yeah, I can completely see why people make the comparison. I'd seen the film, but I wouldn't count it as a big inspiration. My biggest inspiration, and this is what I always think, it's sort of a bit of an example of kind of almost like a weird sexism thing of people always saying that I must have ripped off American Psycho, and I didn't. I ripped off another woman writer. So it's the thing that it's like the closest to is Tampa by Alyssa Nutting, who it's a fantastic book, and it's like a female psychopath narrator, and I read that book in like 2016, and I was just so blown away by it that I kind of like, I really wanted to do something like that. And then I read a book called The End of Alice by A.M. Holmes, which again has a sort of very complex and difficult female narrator. And those were my two kind of big inspirations for Boy Parts. So it's actually it's two women writers that I'm kind of pinching from the most.
And that's great. I think I was really drawn to I remember reading your book. I was traveling in New York, and I was reading your book on the subway, and every minute I had, I just stopped and read a little bit, and then I was so scared of having someone like Irina around me somewhere. I was like, yeah, I should not be reading this in public, because I will now look over my shoulder every time for like crazy women. And then I thought, no, but they would not be coming for me. They would be coming for any. She would be coming for any man. So I should be fine. Another thing that I felt while reading the book, I always felt judged by Irina, like all my choices. And whenever Irina talked about something or she criticized something, I always felt like I was the target to that criticism. And especially when she describes Flo's taste in men, I felt like, okay, this is me. So thank you so much for judging me, Irina. I did not need this. You chose violence today, and that's fine. So she's saying that Flo liked Harry Styles a few years before, and then she was like really interested in Timothée Chalamet, which is and I will quote you, that white bread, absolutely fucking baguette of a lad from Call Me by Your Name. And it really hit close to home here. So thank you so much for for judging me. But now that I know that you are a little bit more like Flo, I feel like you understand me, so that's okay. And this leads me to one of my I'm really curious to ask you this, because your book has a really, really British humor. It's sarcastic, it's dark, it's British. How has it been received in other countries? Do you have any idea? Because I feel that this is specifically from Britain, some parts and some jokes. And
yeah, I'm not sure, I think it's been selling quite consistently in the States. I stay away from user reviews, and because it
that's
kind
wise.
of yeah, I think so. And I think because it had been like it had sort of been circulating in the States before it came out there. It hadn't. I think it didn't get a lot of sort of professional coverage when it came out properly there. But yeah, I'm not quite sure how it's been received. I'd be fascinated to see how it translates, particularly across languages. I mean, it's I think it's been translated into Croatian and Portuguese now. And yeah, I'd be so fascinated to learn if the humor lands at all in translation. I think because it's like you said, I think the tone is very British, but also a lot of the kind of cultural
Yeah.
references are very British. And I think like it's been quite interesting hearing. I mean, I'm focusing on the States because I guess that's the big international language, a big international market where I can speak the language, so I know what people are saying about it. I think people tend to get more of the like broader cultural humor, and there's a lot more focus on the kind of gender dynamics that are a bit more universal, and the kind of pop culture sort of I think in some of the more tonal stuff doesn't really get brought up. I think there's a lot of stuff about British class politics, I mean, it shouldn't really translate anywhere because class politics in Britain are absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And they should remain arcane and like
Yeah.
ununderstandable to other people because it's ridiculous here. It's a very silly country. Um, but yeah, I would be so fascinated to find out how it kind of how the humor translates. I don't know, what did you think of it when you read it? If you have read it in Portuguese as
I've read
well.
it in English. Yeah, I haven't read it in Portuguese yet, but I'm really curious because a lot of friends of mine and a lot of book Instagrammers, and because it came out really recently, so a lot of people are like, I think they are really focused mainly on Irina's character and how she is, and all of her choices, and more than this like the all the tone, the sarcastic tone that you have and this references. But yeah, I felt the need to ask you because I was really interested to know if you had any idea how people are reading it, because yeah, I read a lot of British novels, so I tend to have like a little bit more context, and I have family in the UK, so it's really different. But that's why I was curious. And Boy Parts is now a play.
Yes.
How did that happen?
The woman who adapted Boy Parts for the stage, Gillian Greer, basically just got in touch about it will be about a year ago now. Actually, it's come together quite quickly. Saying that she really enjoyed it and that she'd like to adapt it for the stage. And she works for Soho Theatre, which is the theatre that has put Boy Parts on. And it came together quite naturally. I think it's a one-woman show. So we've got one actress on the stage, and one actress on stage, Amy Kelly, who's fantastic, almost performing it almost as a monologue, which has been fascinating, and it works really, really well, I think. But yeah, no, it's been amazing, and it's been so quick. I feel so lucky that Jill read the book and wanted to adapt it for stage.
How involved were you in the process? Did you participate in any choices?
I consulted on it, so I read a couple of drafts of the script before it went on and had notes and bits and bobs. So I've been relatively involved. So the director and the writer have had far more kind of involvement in the actual putting together of the show on stage. So it's Sarah Joycey as the director, and Gillian Greer again adapted for stage. And yeah, they've done a really, really good job of bringing it to life, as well as Amy, the actress that's playing Irina.
And did you like the final result? Did you like the final result?
Yes, I did. Yeah. Yeah, I think
having
it's
a
been
bit of a
great.
delay.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe we've caught up now.
I know.
But yeah, I really
yeah.
enjoyed the. Oh, yeah, there we go. Sorry, our internet connection's been a little bit
No worries.
yeah, the adaption's been great, and it's been really well received, and it's been great to see like people who enjoyed the book enjoying the play now as well.
Great. Um, do you would like to talk about your writing process, because it's something that here in Portugal people always ask writers, and I'm sure we have a lot of to be writers watching us today. So I know that you have a solid short story background, and Boy Parts was initially a short story, and then you evolved it into a novel. How what do you feel are the main differences between writing short stories and writing a more long format?
Yeah, I think I guess that it sounds really obvious, but I suppose the main difference is just that it's so much longer. So you have to have an idea that's a lot more robust and a lot more multifaceted and has a lot more space to explore. I think in a short story, I think the initial idea is more important and kind of executing an interesting idea. Whereas I think with a novel you can maybe get away with having an idea that's less interesting as long as you've got characters that are very interesting, and it can really carry a novel very far. Whereas you can get away with kind of, I guess, having slightly thinner characters in a short story, and plotting that maybe isn't as kind of, well, I guess it doesn't have to be as like well paced either. The I think the story will often kind of carry itself through for however long it needs to be. Whereas a novel will, I think you basically, I feel like a novel, you've kind of got to make it, you've got to make the novel work. Whereas I think short story ideas often kind of work for themselves.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
But yeah, I found a lot of writers have like a strong, yeah, I think a lot of writers seem to have a strong preference, like one way or the other, whether they prefer or think they're better at short stories or novels. And I quite like, I enjoy both. I think both processes are equally sort of fun for me. So yeah.
That was my next question. So, which one did you prefer? But yeah, how would you just describe your writing process, like your typical writing day?
Um, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of the word to use it for here. I'm very unregimented. Very, so I guess it's very led by my own interest on the particular day. I guess like I'm trying to think of the word here, like maybe like instinctual, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
When I wrote Boy Parts, I was actually relatively well regimented with it, and that I was working a 4-day-a-week job at the time. So on Fridays, I would go and sit and write Boy Parts in a cafe for a day. But I think in part of that, I was able to do that because I was just so interested in the project and I really wanted to work on it. And also, it was my only project as well, because I was still working and I hadn't been published yet. For my second novel, that process more fraught and a lot less kind of instinct and fun led because I was under contract to write it basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wrote my second novel during the pandemic, and I was very reliant on being outside of my home and being in a cafe where I could kind of concentrate to get
Mm-hmm.
things done. And that was sort of how I'd learned to write, I guess, because it's the environment I was used to for Boy Parts. So I really, really struggled to write my second novel, and I kind of had to learn to write at home again. And I was far less sort of, I'm gonna go and work on my novel on a Friday. A lot more like, okay, I'm in the mood to do it right now. Let's try and get as much done as I can while I'm in the mood to do it. And then
Yeah.
when I don't want to touch it for 3 weeks, I know that I've at least made some progress too. And I think also I can write really quickly when I'm motivated, and I also do a lot of editing. I like to edit myself quite heavily before I send it on to an agent or an editor. So I think knowing that I can basically I benefit a lot from knowing that I can write a lot very quickly and then edit it as well and get it into like a decent shape and quite a short. So it means that kind of, I guess, when I was struggling with Penance, which was my second novel, I spent like maybe like 2 years pretty much just working out what on earth I was doing with the first half of that book. And then I pretty much wrote the second half of the book in about a month. And then, I mean, it was edited very thoroughly, so I shouldn't say that and then it just came out. Yeah, whereas I think Boy Parts was much more gradual. It was much more like I would sit and I would write 2,000 words in one day, and then maybe I would edit it over the weekend, or maybe I would write a bit more at the weekend. But yeah, Boy Parts was it was a really, really fun writing experience. I really, really enjoyed it. And then I've started working on my third novel now, and the process for that has been more like Boy Parts, in that it's more like something that I'm working on in my spare time because I'm enjoying it, rather than something that I'm feeling like I need to write and that I'm having to carve out time to write it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's really common. I don't know if you've read something about it, but I'm currently writing my second novel as well. So it's really hard. It's a really hard process.
Yeah.
And I've read a lot of articles of a lot of writers saying that there's this really second novel
Difficult
complex
novel.
or something like that. It's like a second child that is like really terrible. And I feel that all writers have this same experience with their second novel. So I don't know why that happens, but it's interesting to know that
it seems very common. Yes, if it helps, if it helps you feel better about the difficult second novel, I'm finding the third one a lot easier. Like I feel a lot more kind of free after having gotten through the difficult second book. But yeah, no, it was horrible to write, and I think it was particularly horrible because it was during the pandemic as well. But I think I would have struggled a lot with it either way.
Yeah. Do you feel that's because now you have readers' expectations or your own expectations?
I think it was more my own expectations. I started writing my second book before Boy Parts had come out. And then when Boy Parts came out in 2020, it came out originally with a small press in the UK. So it did well for what it was for the first year, but it was really like kind of about 18 months after it was published that it really, really seemed to kind of go viral almost on TikTok. So I didn't feel a lot of pressure to like for readers. But I felt a lot of pressure from myself, and a lot of I think your first novel is often something that's so like your interests and like all of the things that you're interested in that moment, and all of the things that you want to write about, and almost the story that comes the most naturally to you. And then I think it's once you've used that, then having to do a second book, and then often having to do it on a time crunch as well. It is having to sit back and be like, what else can I do?
What am I doing?
And that can be answering that question can be, yeah, exactly. Who am I? What else do I like? What else can sustain my interest? What else can I write about? Is like a really, really big question. And it's so pressurizing and terrifying that you're never going to get past like 30,000 words, and you're going to find out that you actually only had one book in you the entire time. Yeah, it can be really, really stressful. And I think even if you're like me and you are a little bit more free from readers' expectations, expectations, it can be, I mean, for people who have like an absolutely huge hit for their first novel and then have to write their second during that sort of noise, I don't know how people do that. I think it must be really, really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for this therapy session. I will send you the money for it.
Yes, I was going to say I'll send you the bill.
Thank you. You talked about TikTok, and how do you see TikTok, and how do you feel that it has influenced this hype around boy parts?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for it ultimately. I think even though I might wince a little bit being described as a TikTok sensation every single time I'm mentioned in a newspaper or whatever. That can be a little bit like sometimes, but yeah, I think I'm ultimately just super grateful that it found an audience, and that I feel like just very, very lucky that whatever it was about boy parts kind of latched onto the TikTok algorithm and sent it around there. I mean, like I said, I was initially the first time I got sent like a TikTok that had like I think it had like 200,000 views or something like that by a friend. I was just like, I remember feeling sick, and I remember saying like, don't ever send me one of these again. I don't want to see them. Because I saw that and I kind of thought like, right, I'm gonna get cancelled on TikTok. I'm weeks away from being cancelled on TikTok is what's happening here. But I think the book talk audience is very it seems a lot more open-minded and a lot more flexible than maybe the rest of the TikTok audience. And yeah, I'm just very grateful that the book was taken in good faith as well, and it didn't lead to, I don't know, I guess a bunch of teenagers accusing me of literally murdering men.
Men, yeah. Yeah. So I think I have one final question for you, and then we can open up to the audience's questions. But this is a question that I often ask other writers whenever I meet them, and it's this one: which book do you wish was written by you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I recently read, a couple of months ago, I read Yellowface by Rebecca Kwong, and I think, God, what a fantastic book that is. I think it's such a good idea, and it's so well executed. And I'm really interested in like plagiarism stories and like literary capers and like, I guess, unreliable narrators and people who lie. So when I read it, I was so like, oh, I wish I'd thought of this first. Maybe not so much the specific like the specific racial dynamic in that book, but I think just the very basic idea of a writer steals another writer's manuscript and says it's theirs is so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my most recent one. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I haven't read it yet, but I've read Bubble and I loved it as well. It's a little bit different, but yeah. Okay, so I think we can open to
Yes, I need to
questions.
I
I
haven't
see
read anything
some.
else by her, but I could really do with going back.
Okay, so Hui is asking, what do you think is the importance of perspective, both in photography and in writing?
Oh, that's interesting. Do you mean perspective, like almost kind
I
of
feel
like
like it's
the
point of
point of
view.
view,
Yeah.
or perspective? Well, yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's so essential. I think it kind of entirely changes. It can entirely change an image or entirely change the context of a story. It's a really interesting question. I think because boy parts is so much about kind of questioning perspective as well, in terms of like I said, the initial idea for it was almost like, what if a woman treated men the way, or a woman tried to treat men the way that men treat women? I mean, a lot of it was inspired, but I actually kind of hit a bit of a wall when I was writing it initially. And I got like stuck sort of about halfway through and didn't write it for a little bit. And then I went on a trip to Berlin with some friends, and we happened to see a major retrospective of the photographer Helmut Newton while we were there, who is just for anybody who doesn't know in the audience, was like a big German fashion photographer who basically exclusively photographed these like just like beautiful naked women. And this exhibition was so fawning of this work, and it was like, but it was just like beautiful naked women, and it was bullshit. It was like, it was such bullshit. And I remember I've never been so angry leaving an art gallery as I was reading all of these like fawning captions about like just basically just pictures of skinny white women, and that's all it was. And yeah, I think I think that was like a big breakthrough for me, was really kind of thinking about like who writes the captions in art galleries, and who takes the photographs, and who is in the photographs, and who kind of dictates the narratives about what's good and what isn't, and what's art isn't, and who's the subject and who's the artist. It was like a big sort of, I guess, kind of a big breakthrough for me for this. And yeah, it made like a huge difference, was kind of questioning that perspective for me. So yeah, I think they're both really essential, and they were particularly essential for Boy Parts.
Well, okay. We now have another question in Portuguese, which I will translate for you. Do you have any
Thank you.
literary projects in mind for the future? You said that you are writing your third novel. And
yes,
I also happen to know that you are editing a short stories collection as well.
Yes, yeah. So the short story collection, the short story collection is out in the UK in, I think it's going to be autumn of 2024, but I'm not sure about the exact release date. And then it's always interesting to see kind of if or when these things manage to make their way out internationally. I would love to get another Portuguese translation though. And I think that's so I've got that, and then my third novel I'm working on at the minute, which has been really, really fun. It's sort of more like speculative fiction. I think it's make a lot more sense to readers after my short story collection has come out, which has a lot more in a kind of speculative space. But yeah, it's been really, really fun to work on so far.
Great. We have a lot of questions written in English, so you can just like. Patricia is asking your favorite writers, movie, series, city. She wants to know all your favorite things, basically.
I know, gosh. My favorite is, I already mentioned Alyssa Nutting and A.M. Holmes, who I both really, really love. I really like Stephen King, and I really like Vladimir Nabokov. So I'm kind of I guess that's my sort of jack of all trades. Big four. Movies, I'm like a huge film person. I kind of, in some ways, I'm like more influenced by films than I am books. But I love I'm really into world cinema. Particularly, I'm into Japanese cinema, so and Korean cinema. And I was into Korean cinema before Parasite, by the way. That's my big claim to fame, is that claim to cultural relevance, was that I like Korean stuff before Parasite came out. My favorite director is Chan-wook Park, and my favorite film is Lady Vengeance from the Vengeance trilogy. And I also really, really like I Love Perfect Blue by Satoshi Kon. My favorite English language films are probably Midnight Cowboy and Cabaret. And then I think my favorite TV series is Mad Men of all time. I love Mad Men and I love The Sopranos. I'm very basic in that. And my favorite city is probably Newcastle upon Tyne. It's the greatest city on earth. It's where I'm from. I don't live there anymore, but I do love it. It is my favorite city.
Great. Okay, was Boy Parts the original title all the time, or you had other ideas for the title? And let me tell you something before you answer, is that I'm really happy because the Portuguese translation kept Boy Parts as the title, and then it has like the Portuguese translation here. This is not common in Portugal, so usually we translate all the titles, and usually poorly translated titles as well. But this, I was really happy when I saw like Boy Parts and then the little translation here. So yeah.
Yeah, it's been that's actually been it's been a challenge to translate. We've got a couple of other translations coming up, and it's been really interesting how much the title has kind of caused problems because it's obviously it's a pun with like a kind of
Yeah.
double meaning. So it's been interesting seeing how different translators grapple with taking that over into different languages. But it actually was the original title. It was the first one I came up with it, and it stuck. I came up with a couple of other alternatives because I thought that it would get rejected, but it was by far the best one I came up with, and that was why it stuck. I think it's the same with my novel actually, which is called Penance. That was just literally just
Yeah.
like something that I came up with on the spot for submission, and then it ended up sticking all the way through to publication.
And do you have difficulty with titles, or do you, or are they easy for you?
Yeah, I really struggle with them. I find them really, really difficult. I think it's so hard to come up with something that feels like snappy, clever, fits the work, and is like Googleable. I
Yeah.
think I have an easier time titling short stories than I do novels. I had like yeah, like I said, I think Boy Parts was a bit of a just like it was just like a really good idea that I happened to have in the moment. Whereas Penance, I went through a whole like I said, it was the working title that stuck, but I was like insistent that that was not going to be the, and I came up with loads and they were all awful. And we stuck with Penance, which was by far the best one that I came up with for it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. How has the writing process changed from the first to the third book? More specifically, what were some mistakes that you made in the first book in terms of the process that you now corrected?
Oh, in terms of the process, I think it was probably patience was a big issue for me, particularly for the first book. I think because it was my first novel, I think what I should have done is I should have put it away for 6 months and then come back to it and given it another global edit. Whereas I basically I finished it in the December of 2018, and then for the next 6 months, all I did was edit it and send it to agents and edit it and send it to agents and edit it and send it to agents. And I think what I would have benefited from is probably maybe around springtime of that year, putting it down and then coming back to it in 6 months and editing it again. Like things about the book that do bug me. In terms of, I think just as somebody with a lot more writing experience now, particularly coming back to it after having done now quite a lot of work writing for television, or at least nothing that will ever probably see the light of day, but a lot of work in development and script writing. And working on the adaptation of Boy Parts, which hasn't been greenlit, but that I have been working on. I'm very aware of like points where the story could have been streamlined and things could have been changed and things could have just been made to flow a little bit easier. That I think if I had given it a little bit more time, I probably would have trimmed out myself. So now it's kind of like there are some things in there that bug me. So I think, yeah, definitely, because for your first book, you've just got all the time in the world to write it. And I think that has probably been the thing that I have really taken over to my third book, is especially after writing my second book under contract as well and having a time crunch, is like making sure that I don't have a time crunch and I have as much time as possible to write it and go back to it and think about it and really like hammer it out and make it as kind of tight as possible.
Yeah, and let it breathe as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the best thing you can do for a book is to give it some breathing room before you kind of send it out into the world.
I know we had, that was the question I was aiming for. If there was a movie adaptation for Boy Parts, which actress should play Irina?
Oh, I don't know, this has kind of been a struggle when we've been talking about it for television, because there is this is a thing that probably won't have translated at all, particularly because I'm speaking not in my accent, really. The northeast of England has a really, really specific dialect, which is also it's like one of the most difficult accents to do in like English language as well. It's really, really hard and really, really specific. So it's basically finding an actress either from the region or sort of regional enough that she can do the accent properly is going to be so hard. So I'm not sure. At the minute, Amy Kelly is doing a fantastic job of playing her on stage. I'll say that much, and she is from the region. Yeah.
Okay. And I know that you recorded the audiobook version for Boy Parts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it fun?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually. I had a great time with it. I recorded it so usually you would go into a recording, like into a professional recording studio to do it, but because I recorded the pandemic, they sent this like soundproof sort of pop-up cube thing to my flat, which I then sort of set up, and I was sitting on like a dining room chair in front of a laptop that they'd sent me and a mic that they'd sent me. And it was actually quite easy, I think, because I read it so shortly after having been published. I basically almost knew the entire book off the top of my by heart anyway. So it was just 2 solid days of reading out my own book and doing the voices, and it was really, really fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Here in Portugal, audiobooks are still like starting to be something that people enjoy. So yeah, who knows? We'll have your translated book as an audiobook.
Maybe.
Do we have any more questions?
So I don't think we have any more questions, but I have a question actually. So I'm also a huge film nerd, and I looked up almost all movies you've referenced, and you have some very dark and underground films there. Have you actually seen them all, or was it just research?
So I have like an academic interest in extreme cinema, and I've watched a lot of them, but I would say probably about maybe only like 60 to 70%. A lot of the films that I've referenced, it's like I've seen clips of and I know about them, and they're just like, nobody needs to watch all of Necromantic. It's a very boring film. Like a lot of things they are very boring. They're just kind of like 80 minutes of like screaming and blood and guts, and you don't necessarily need to watch any of them. But it's kind of stuff that I knew about from my my like academic interest in my research and writing during university, but nothing that I've necessarily felt the need to sit through myself. Some of it's just, I think there's like a line in Boy Parts, which is, I guess, one of my favorite jokes, where she says that she puts on one of the August Underground films and then cleans her house. And those films are just like screaming. There's nothing else to those films apart from people screaming and shouting and like being tortured. And I just thought, what a funny thing to put on while you clean your house.
Yeah.
The most sort of sicko behavior that Irina engages in is putting on those films and then just like pottering around and dusting and hoovering.
Amazing. I think we have another question, just popping it up here. So, yeah.
Yes, that's a film that is set in Newcastle. I'm trying to think of other ones. There's a film called Billy Elliot, which is about a boy that becomes a ballet dancer, which is it's set in County Durham, which is a little bit south of Newcastle, but that's it as well. And Purely Belter is another film that's about football. If anybody's interested in football, but yeah, I Daniel Blake is a film that is probably the most recent film that's been set in the region.
Great. Yeah, I think we're done.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, both of you, Rita and Eliza, for this hour. It's been great. I haven't been here live, but I've been laughing a lot throughout the whole time. And thank you so much. Okay, that's it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.